Welcome to another exciting episode of the Andre The Beast Crayton Show. Today, we're going to tap into the hidden world of space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the Andre Enterprises. Let's put it like this. My 5-year mission to explore a strange new world, new technology, and to seek out all that information is about to be unveiled on this episode. So let me tell you where we're going with this. Imagine fulfilling your dreams in aerospace technology and human evolution, life in general, on all aspects, because when you mention the word life, it means everything that is on the biological, microscopic, and what we, I guess, consider human beings. Today on the show, we have I guess we would say NASA representative or former or current. But when you got the name NASA, you still got some relativity going on in my book. I'd like to welcome Michaela. I'm going to see, can I pronounce it like? No, Dr. Michaela Musilova. Did I pronounce the last name right?
Musilova.
Musilova to the show. How you doing?
Good, thank you. Thanks for having me on your show.
I spent forever trying to pronounce this name correctly, and I did it twice, and then I get ready to do it, and I can't get it right. So you're from not the United States with a beautiful name like that. You are from, is it Slovakia?
Slovakia, yeah, that's
Slovakia.
right.
Oh my God, Slovakia to the United States. Before we get started, tell the viewers a little bit about yourself.
Well, hi, everyone. As I was kindly introduced, I'm Dr. Michaela Musilova. I'm an astrobiologist. That means I'm searching for aliens in space, essentially. I'm trying to understand how life came to be on Earth. And I'm also looking into whether we humans could live on other planets, like on Mars. And that's why I've been nicknamed a Marsonaut, so someone who's been on simulated Mars. So not real Mars yet, but working on that, because I've been the commander of over 30 simulated missions to the moon and Mars.
Wow. Now, when did all this come about? Because I don't know much about your country. What's it like growing up over there? And was space frontier always in the back of your mind?
So when I grew up in Slovakia, it was right after the fall of the Iron Curtain, so the end of the Cold War. My country had just, finally been liberated to some degree from socialist ruling. And soon after I was born, my country actually became independent. It was part of Czechoslovakia. So I was actually born Czechoslovak. And then the two countries split into the Czech Republic and Slovakia in 1993. And let's just say the beginning of my life was kind of very turbulent during these times. I grew up in a very modest environment, in a building that was collapsing, family of modest means. And so while I had space dreams since I was 8 years old, they always seemed very much like science fiction. And I knew that if I wanted to do anything related to space, I would have to leave my home country. And so I hesitated for a long time because I fell in love with space. Yeah, when I was about 8 years old, I already then wanted to know more about aliens, whether they could exist in our solar system. And I wanted to become an astronaut to be able to search for them myself. But it was a hard decision to pursue that dream because I knew I would have to leave my home country, and I would have to also earn a lot of money to be able to study abroad because my parents couldn't support me financially. So from the age of about 15, I had multiple jobs, even while in high school, trying to save up money. I then got scholarships to go to the UK to study there. And that's when I finally got into something close to astrobiology. And basically, the only way I was eventually able to work at NASA at 21 years old was just to have many, many jobs while studying and always trying to have the best grades to get every single scholarship under the sun, as we say. And I even got help from charities and other grants like that. But it paid off because I was able to study in the UK. Then I got into Caltech in the US, and I was finally able to do astrobiology work at 21 at NASA.
Wow, that's a journey. But let's go back. Let's
Yeah.
go back for a minute because you're talking about the fall of military powers going at one another. How was the ideal or the concept of space even brought to you? Because let me put it like this: the news is always going to amplify fear versus anything else. So when see what was going on in Slovakia and the walls crumbling, we ourselves as Americans, we really didn't understand the full impact. And you have very big dreams. I mean, really, how were you even exposed to even the concept of studying anything to do with space and space life?
I'm very grateful to my parents for that, because they were great at encouraging me to follow my different passions. So, as weird and wonderful as some of my passions were, for example, I remember taking like a dissection class in elementary school, and then I was fascinated with art, so they let me do art things. And eventually, I just had a bug for space things, and my mom would buy me or rent from the library books about space. And so she would kind of encourage me to dig deeper into things that I was passionate about. But I guess they never expected me to go abroad and follow those passions. They just thought it was something I was interested in, and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do later in life. But sadly, in Slovakia, there were essentially no possibilities to pursue space. And I knew that from a very young age that if I wanted to pursue this passion, I would have to leave my home country. And yeah, my only access to space was really through books. And one day I was also fortunate enough that I got to meet our first and so far only astronaut from Slovakia, Ivan Bela. He actually went to space as part of an exchange program of sorts with Russia because Russia owed Slovakia some money and they were never able to really repay it. So instead, they offered them a possibility to send someone to space for a few days. So he got very lucky, got to do some amazing work, and that really inspired me to want to try to do something similar.
When you got to meet the first astronaut in your country, what were some of the questions that you asked him, and what were some of the things that he shared with you? Because you just indicated that um, the opportunities in aerospace engineering was completely non-existent, or should we call very limited there. So what were some of the things that he shared with you about what he went through, what he saw, what made it so mesmerizing for him that amplified what you wanted to do even further?
I think what fascinated me the most was that he was involved in different research projects. Because I think since I was a young girl, I always wanted to do something useful for the world. I didn't, just want to go to space to, say I am, the first Slovak woman to go there or anything like that. I always wanted to do something helpful. And I was fascinated by some of the research he was doing in space. So, for example, they were cultivating these little birds in these like huge centrifuges in space to see if they could grow birds on a space station for food, for laying eggs, and things like that. It was the first time that something like that had been done in space. And it was just, for me, it was very interesting to hear about a scientific project like that. And he shared some funny stories about the issues they had with the birds and how the astronauts didn't want to eat the birds. They felt sorry for them. And so it was just very endearing and very down to earth, quote unquote, the way he spoke to me about these things. And I think it just really ignited this curiosity in me to want to know more, to be involved. And I think another thing that then I thought a lot about after meeting this astronaut was I looked into more astronauts. And I realized that there are very few women astronauts out there. The majority are men to this day. And I think even as a little girl, I was, maybe around 10 years old when this happened. I thought to myself, oh, I want to prove that we women can do this too. And that was, in a way, also a motivation to pursue this dream.
You talk about cultivating some type of life form in space. So, are you telling the viewers that you went on the moon or you went to a space station? Where was all these things being conducted that he was doing?
Yeah, I think the astronaut, Ivan Bella, he went to the Mir space station. That's where he was conducting this research.
What is that? Because I've never heard of it. What is that called? What is that?
So the name is Mir, and I don't think it exists anymore. But it was one of the first space stations out there where astronauts could actually live and stay there for a few days to conduct research projects.
Mhm.
And it was essentially, in a way, a predecessor to what is now the International Space Station, where astronauts live and work there, for over a year sometimes. And humans have been continuously living and working on the International Space Station for quite a few years now.
How long have these space stations been there? I mean, they don't get amplified on television, but you're saying these space stations been out there for years. Were these space stations built in collaboration with other countries?
So, if I remember correctly, I think Mir was purely a Russian space station, but the International Space Station is mainly a collaboration of the Russian Space Agency, NASA, and the European Space Agency. But they also bring in astronauts from other countries from around the world, but it's mainly maintained, if I remember correctly, between the Russians, the Americans, and the European Space Agency. And it's been in orbit for at least a couple of decades. I can't remember the exact year when they finished building it and people have been able to function there for long periods of time. However, it is currently the only station of its type, this kind of international facility, and there is no replacement for it. But this station, because it's been in orbit for much longer than originally planned, it is falling apart to some degree. It's very old, it's very dirty at this point. So we're hoping that there'll be a replacement for it soon because its life expectancy shouldn't be extended too much because of its current state.
You're talking about space travel, life. Why do you think, now that you're deeply involved in it with NASA, with meeting other individuals in your field, what's the urgency? Or is Earth in is Earth suffering that we have to eventually look for other resources outside of our own planet?
I would say the main motivation to potentially live on Mars or look for other possibilities for humans, I would say is mostly curiosity. Curiosity is what has driven humans to explore our own planet. Now we're exploring beyond it. It's what has driven scientists to find all sorts of new discoveries and help improve our life here on Earth. So I think we're mostly just curious. We want to see what else is out there, what other possibilities are there.
Mhm.
And while being able to live on Mars, for example, would be a great benefit for humanity to have, in a way, not all our eggs in one basket here on Earth, but to also kind of expand to another planet. We to be able to go to Mars, we'd have to develop all sorts of amazing technologies to protect the humans on the way there and back. To be able to even live there for long periods of time, they have to essentially find a way to produce their own oxygen and water on Mars using local resources. They have to be able to grow their own food for long periods of time. So everything that a mission to Mars will bring to us humans will be very beneficial to us here on Earth too, because we can essentially use those same technologies and environments on Earth where it's difficult to grow things. With climate change and our changing environment, we might actually have to apply a lot of these technologies that will be beneficial to Mars here on Earth too. So I would say yes, our planet is changing and not in good ways right now. But what we really need to do is focus on taking better care of our planet while at the same time exploring other possibilities, because I think it will really help advance humanity to be able to go to Mars. But I wouldn't see Mars as a backup plan or as, an alternative to Earth just yet.
We've seen a lot of ambush journalism, both in um, media and television, but we also see television writing narratives about space. We've seen it in such episodes as Star Trek. We see it in They Are Among Us. We've seen a lot of um, Transformers. We see a lot of what they call extraterrestrial forms of life. You have dealt with this on the um, micro type level. But to go back to the question in general, have you ever heard or seen or talked to astronauts that have physically seen what may appear to be some type of extraterrestrial encounter, whether it be a unidentified object, just things that really don't make no sense? But as a scientist, reconfirms the ambush journalism that there is some type of life form out there and maybe even more advanced than what we are. What's your take on that?
Mhm. I mean, so far I have not encountered an astronaut or a scientist that has in any way claimed that they actually had some kind of encounter with an extraterrestrial life form or anything like that. I myself have not seen any kind of evidence that I would find convincing as a scientist that there is some kind of life like that out there. But that doesn't mean that they don't exist. And just because maybe we might not have witnessed it or don't have full proof that something like that exists, it doesn't mean that there might not even be on this planet. It just means that we haven't figured out a way to look for them or identify them properly yet. So a lot of the research that we do is based on life as we know it. So we're looking for other carbon life forms that need water and certain types of nutrients to survive. That's what we've been doing when we've been looking for life on Mars and other parts of our solar system and beyond. But it's possible that life is based on something completely different, and we just don't even know really how to look for it. So, in a way, we're using an elimination method. We're looking for something that we can recognize based on how we survive on this planet. But perhaps it's the wrong method, and we just haven't figured out how to look for aliens in different ways. And so I'm definitely open minded in this respect. I just haven't seen any proof yet that would convince me that there are some alien life forms here on Earth or beyond yet.
Now, you get into NASA at the young age of 21 years old. I'm pretty sure there are classified areas that even yourself, you're not allowed to go into. So, this is just a hypothesis question, but NASA has numerous branches. So, could there be other life forms that basically you're not even classified to know about for, let's call it what it is, national security reasons as it pertains to extraterrestrial life?
Sure. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. After all, I'm sure the government has their ways of hiding what they consider to be important information from the public, from even, scientists. And I'm, still a foreign national in this country. So I wouldn't be surprised if certain things were hidden from me. And yeah, I can only work with, the information that I have to hand.
Let's talk about the environmental climate changes. You've traveled, you're in NASA, and that global warming has always been a topic of discussion. You have the critical thinkers that say, well, solar flare is only this degree and it can't affect the planet and so forth. What are you hearing and what have you witnessed as a scientist that is part of NASA, as well as being independent with your own foundation, which we'll get into, your non-profit. I mean, that we'll get into in a minute. But what's going on with the climate control in NASA as far as you since you've been there?
So, I've worked with institutions all around the world. I've gone on expeditions to Arctic, Antarctic environments, deserts, and so on. So I've literally explored various parts of our planet over the last couple of decades as part of my research. And what I've seen is that really the environment is changing. There's absolutely no doubt about it. Glaciers are melting faster and faster. For example, a couple of years ago, I was on the summit of Kilimanjaro, the tallest mountain in Africa,
Mm.
and there was almost no ice near me. Glaciers were really far away. But when my father was there in 1995, he was almost standing on a glacier. Glaciers were feet away from him. And at the rate we're going, soon, within about 10 years, there won't be any more ice on mountains like Kilimanjaro, which means that Africa will lose a huge source of fresh water for the humans to use, the animals and vegetation in the surroundings, and that will have a huge effect on these people who might have to migrate because of that. And similar changes are happening every single place I've been to on our planet. So it's very visible, and I'm sure people are maybe noticing, how there are more hurricanes and other natural disasters that are happening year to year. So it's very obvious to us scientists. We see it. We've been, talking about it for decades, and it's only now that it seems the public is finally starting to understand how this really does affect us all.
We know that even the balance of salt in the ocean can cause serious climate changes, even put us back into what we might call the ice age into some regions. What are what how likely are we to see a global climate change on a severity level, with something as simple as the salt balance changing in the oceans right now?
So it depends on a lot of factors. There are different types of climate models that are trying to predict how our future might develop, and it really depends on what we do every single day, how much we recycle, how much we're good at preserving water and not consuming so much, not creating so much trash that's going to pollute the environment. So it's all interlinked, and it really depends on essentially a yearly basis of how we humans behave, and that will affect just how quickly some of these potential disasters might happen. But currently, we're looking at, for example, a sea level rise within the next couple of decades that could cause huge flooding all around the world. That will affect millions of people that will have to migrate because of that. And that will be interlinked with other different types of climate related issues. So again, these natural disasters, not just flooding, but other things that will be happening. So it's hard to tell, and I don't want to be all doom and gloom here. I'm saying it's
Right.
still in our power
Mhm.
to reduce this effect. We can all still, try and do better with how we take care of the environment. And it will mean that these bad things will, I wouldn't say not happen, but they will happen on a much smaller scale, and they will happen much further into the future. So the better we are towards our planet now, the longer we have to, enjoy an environment that's not too difficult for us to be in.
Yeah, because you talked about something that was real critical. You talked about at one point of your father's lifespan, he was standing on glaciers. So just imagine those glaciers, um, melting, dumping tons of fresh water into salt water, the economic global effects that alone can happen. I don't think people really realize some of the things on Earth that are happening now, but from a scientific standpoint in space, what else are you guys seeing outside of that's outer space that's affecting, that could or is affecting this planet?
I mean, there's a lot of factors, outside our planet that can have an effect here. But mostly a lot of what we're experiencing now is, I would say, more local to Earth because it's to do with the greenhouse gases being trapped in our atmosphere, and that's exacerbating a lot of these bad things that are happening here, the pollution and all that. And so, for example, if there was a big solar flare, yes, that would have an effect on our planet, where, for example, we might lose power in the northern hemisphere for some time, or there would be like greater doses of radiation that would impact us here on Earth. But I would say from a space perspective, the environment of the universe isn't affecting us as much as what is happening within our atmosphere on our planet.
You talked about alien life and your study on alien life. What is your definition of alien life, and explain what it is that you actually study and why?
So I guess what I would define alien life to be is a life form that originated somewhere outside of Earth, hence the extraterrestrial name, because terrestrial means Earth bound. So something that originated, was created, for example, on Mars or on an asteroid somewhere outside of our planet, and developed to be maybe something simple like a cell, like a microbe, or it developed into something more complicated like some kind of humanoid form that might come and visit us one day, sort of thing. But anything that essentially originated outside of our planet, that's what we would define as alien or extraterrestrial. And from what we've been searching for so far, it's very likely that at least these simple types of alien forms, so like these microbes, little cells, it's pretty likely that we could find something like that even within our solar system, for example, on Mars or on the icy moons of Jupiter and Saturn. However, if we're talking about something more complicated, like an alien life form that could communicate with us in some shape or form, or that flies around in spaceships or things like that, it's much less likely for us to find an organism like that. And that's simply because it we were from life as we know it, it requires a certain amount of good conditions for things to be able to evolve from a cell level to a more complex being like us humans. We're talking probably millions of years in very good conditions for something like that to develop. So the chances for something like that are just simply much lower, but doesn't mean they're non-existent, and the universe is huge. So I personally keep an open mind, and I think that the chances of some more developed alien life form are definitely out there. They're just, we're just less likely to find them than just some microbial cells.
You're a critical thinker, and you're only 34, 35 years old, so your thinking is still young. So you can't possibly tell me that now, with all of the freedom of speech acts and all the records being open, that human evolution, there had to be some life form way, way more advanced than what we call modern Homo sapien. I know that NASA probably has these documents and have these things. I know you're probably limited to what you can get, but let's go back to the critical thinking. Do you think that there had to be some type of life form? You mentioned a mass universe of planets and so forth. You are pretty much a astrobiologist. What's your take on that? Me personally, I think that there had to be a far, far more advanced civilization in this universe than what we are.
And do you mean that this potential advanced civilization affected us here on Earth in some
Right,
way, or that they
right.
just exist?
I think my theory is, and you can piggyback off of whatever, but I think that because we dealing with a mass universe, I mean, let's get real. We just now trying to understand black holes. Now we just found another moon coming. When I was growing up, they said we had seven planets. We went from seven to nine, now to 12. So we're dealing with an infinity of a mass universe And when you have a mass universe, you can't you got to think critically in my viewpoint, because you can't sit here and say that we are the only life form. So you being a biologist, and we're talking about, we just now starting to really unravel the DNA code or the genome code. Where did all this actually come from? You have to think that, yeah, we might have been a backwater planet that some other life form came to visit to mine resources, to saw that there was some type of life here, and decided to do what I might call the decode or the genome generation to create modern Homo sapiens. What's your take on that?
Well, so I would say the chances of some more advanced civilization existing out there in the universe, it's not impossible, and I mentioned that before. I think, why not? It's such a huge place, so many stars and galaxies that have billions of planets where life could exist. Why not? Why couldn't there be a more advanced civilization out there? Now, whether they came here to Earth and somehow did something that helped us evolve to be the way we are, I personally don't think that's really what happened, or I don't think it's necessary for something like that to have happened for us to evolve the way we did. Based on all the scientific evidence we have so far, there's essentially a clear explanation of how evolution happened on this planet, how we started off as these simple cell type forms, and eventually through various things that happened over millions of years on this planet, evolution led us to be here today. So I would say
What do you mean when
there's
you say
really
that, how we formed? I'm interested in, how
Mhm.
did what's your take on how modern humans were formed? I'm curious to know this. I'm pretty sure the viewers are too.
So, I mean, based on the evidence we have so far, it seems that life started here on this planet about 3.5 billion years ago. Just very simple cells that were just trying to survive in very hostile conditions on this planet. And with time, the environment became a bit more clement, more peaceful, and that's because less asteroids were bombarding the surface. And gradually, these cells could evolve into more complex organisms, and eventually there was so much oxygen that built up that actually organisms that could breathe were favored. And so, with time and millions of years, organisms developed to be more complicated. But then things happened, like asteroids fell to the surface of Earth. Other huge events happened on this planet, which would repeatedly kill the dominant organisms, for example, dinosaurs 65 million years ago, which allowed for smaller other organisms to evolve. So, for instance, the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs, most likely 65 million years ago, they allowed mammals to evolve. And then mammals gradually evolved to have things that were monkey like. And then we're essentially a branch of that family that over millions of years evolved into Homo sapiens, again, based on the evidence we have to date. So it took a lot of different events over billions and millions of years, a lot of actually like accidents, like asteroids falling to the surface of this planet, that allowed life to evolve the way it did to its current shape today.
So, what do you take about the fact that individuals are now taking to social media and they're starting to question that theory of evolution by simply saying that we were genetically bred by such alien life as the Anunnakis, that saw some type of hominid creatures here and decided to inbred their genome pool in them to create what we might call modern man. What's your thought on that?
I would say, based on, again, the evidence we have, I don't think anything really proves that something like that happened. I mean, it's a theory. And if these
When you say
people would
we, let me
have
cut
enough
you off for a
proof,
minute. When you say we, who is we? Is this NASA's research or is this the government research? Like, who is we?
I would say the scientific community. So scientists all around the world, the way the scientific community works is we base everything we have on facts. So people prove something, or we find, for example, a fossil or something that proves a certain theory. We question things a lot. And we only advance our theories once we have enough proof to kind of sustain a theory.
Mhm.
And so everything we've reached a conclusion about so far is based on millions and millions of different types of evidence that have been accumulated over many years by thousands, millions of scientists all over the world.
Mhm.
And so we're saying there are millions and millions of bits of evidence that point to evolution being kind of the way I just explained very briefly. And so sometimes people come up with other theories, and that's perfectly fine. That's how science works. We have questions, we try and prove things, disprove things. And until there will be enough evidence to really sustain a theory like that, it just remains a theory rather than a fact.
So, what's your take on such outstanding programs with well-known scientists like the ancient aliens theories, and those are tons of well-recognized scientists that would differ, debate what you're saying, that there's a whole different way of how life was created. What's your take on those scientists?
I mean, I'm not personally aware of who exactly you mean, but like I said, based on evidence that I've read and discussed with other scientists around the world,
Mhm.
for now, there just simply isn't enough evidence to, give weight to those other hypotheses. I'm not saying they're not true. It's important to be able to question things and come up with alternative solutions if they're based on realistic evidence. But until let's say there's enough that has been carefully studied by scientists, people have actually tried to prove that they're correct or incorrect.
Mhm.
Until it is analyzed by many people around the world, it still remains a theory.
We dealt with when we're talking about asteroids and we're talking about space debris, which could carry, let's be real, which could carry some type of micro life form from another planet or galaxy and embed itself into this planet. Not knocking what you're saying. What I'm getting ready to go with this is when you're talking about space debris or asteroids bombarding the Earth, bringing genetic material, um, how likely are we to be infected with with our own lifespan, such as um, let's say COVID? You know, are these different things that are impacting the earth because we don't see it all the time and we get bombarded all the time with some type of asteroid or meteor? Um, these microorganisms, is this the reason? I'm just asking your theory that we're having so many genetic mutated illnesses that could possibly have went with what we might call COVID.
So, in terms of the formation of life on Earth or elsewhere in the universe, there is a theory called panspermia, and
Right,
that is that life could be transported from place to place by things like asteroids and comets,
right.
and that is a potential theory of how life could have started here on Earth. However, in terms of nowadays, most of things that do fall towards Earth, I would say, are very small, and they most likely just burn up in the atmosphere. Anything that's a small object, it will just be destroyed while just traveling through the atmosphere. And anything that is larger, it will cause a small impact. And you just have to imagine the pressures and temperatures when something like that travels through the atmosphere and impacts the ground. They're humongous.
Mhm.
So it is not likely that anything would survive such an impact or such travel through those very strong pressures and temperatures. And that's why even when people find asteroids or when they hit the Earth, they're called meteorites, when they find these rocks, everything is mostly melted. And if there's any potential life in them, they would have to be deep inside this rock. And just based on what we've been able to study so far, it's very, very unlikely that life would survive traveling inside a rock that's a small rock that would fall to the surface of the Earth. Whereas, however, if we're talking about a big asteroid, like something that killed the dinosaurs, that is big enough that in its center, it might have carried some life forms and it might have transported some life forms. So maybe millions of years ago, something like that could have happened. But in these days now, unless a humongous asteroid falls to this planet, which we really hope won't happen because that would be pretty disastrous, it's very unlikely that anything would survive a fall to Earth because it would just be very hard for anything biological to survive those types of temperatures and pressures.
You've been with NASA for quite some time, and what are some of the things that you've witnessed that you can share with the viewers that people would be like, there is no way that this could possibly exist? You mentioned something about even the asteroid that can I believe the word is panspermia.
Panspermia. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Are there artifacts that you guys see in NASA that there is some type of life form that was found in these particular uh, objects?
Mm-hmm. Well, so to clarify, I started working at NASA when I was 21, and since then I've been collaborating with NASA for many years, but I don't currently work there full time. But from what we've seen so far, there have been some meteorites that have been found on the surface of Mars, on the surface of Earth, and that came originally from Mars. And some of these meteorites, or like former mini asteroids, um, they contained some interesting shapes and forms that some researchers thought might be proof that it was alien life that was traveling in this rock when it hit Earth, and this rock was originally from Mars. So maybe, we could in a way be Martians, so to speak, that some alien life, came from Mars to Earth and started here and developed into what we are today. However, this was never proven. Like there have been a lot of studies trying to study these meteorites to understand if it really was alien life form or it was just some, basically just geological shapes in the rock that looked like little worms, but weren't actual life. So these rocks have been studied in detail a lot. And to this day, I'm not aware of them being proven to be real life forms, but there was definitely a lot of debate about it.
Well, first of all, how did Jen even know they came from Mars? Why couldn't they? How did they determine that they couldn't have came from Pluto, Uranus, Saturn, Mercury? I mean, the list goes on. Why?
Yeah,
What made
I
them?
think I don't remember exactly the details, but I think it was based on the geology. So what the rocks were made out of is how they determined that it's most likely that they came from Mars.
What do you think is the fascination with humans and their connection with Mars, with so many other planets out there? Why is Do you think this has been indoctrinated into the human psyche that, hey, let's go to Mars, let's go to Mars? Like what do you think I know you're only 30 some years old, so this is probably like a far-fetched question for you, but you've been with NASA collaborating. You studied this. What is our attraction to the red planet?
I think I would say it's the closest planet to Earth where humans could potentially live one day in the future. There are other planets in our solar system, but they're either too far away for it to be relevant to us right now to be able to live there or go explore those planets and moons, or some planets that are closer to us just have very difficult conditions on their surface, which would basically make it impossible for humans to just go and explore that place. Whereas Mars, it's a place that is essentially within reach. We're talking currently about a 7, 8 month journey to Mars. The conditions on the surface are very difficult, but with the technology we have today, we should be able to create spacesuits that will protect us from those conditions. There is a chance that we could actually create these small settlements on Mars where humans could potentially live long term and even grow our own food and all that. And for us astrobiologists, Mars is interesting because there is still hope that there could be some life on Mars, particularly in underground environments. We know there are these caves that exist on Mars based on some satellite imagery we have. And so it's very likely that there's a lot of these caves on the surface of Mars that could be a great place for alien life to hide, because there they're protected from strong radiation and other conditions that make the surface of Mars very difficult to be able to survive on. But underground, they could be sheltered there. There could be some water flowing in those environments, and the volcanic rock there is full of nutrients. So basically, Mars is interesting because we could both live there and we could look for alien life there.
It sounds
That's
like
my take on it.
it sounds like you're ready to pack your bags. You got some secrets that you're not telling.
No, it's a goal I've been working on since I was like 8 years old, but it's still very much a work in progress.
Okay. My next question before we wrap up. We just found out there's another moon here. What's your take on that?
Another moon in our solar system.
Yeah.
I think, these days we have better and better satellite technology and telescopes and things. So it just makes it so much easier to discover things that before were hidden from us, that, it wasn't easy to find. Also, scientists have I guess change their definition of things. So that's why, growing up, I also, I was brought up with there being 9 planets, and then suddenly Pluto was no longer a planet, and there were only 8. And actually, my professor at Caltech was the person that made Pluto not be a planet anymore, and there was a whole big situation related to that. He would have a lot of children writing him hate mail that, oh, Pluto was my favorite planet, and now I don't have a favorite planet anymore, sort of thing. So I would say it's all related to the evolution of science in a way. Now we can see better, we can find things better, we are defining things better, and that's what kind of makes planets, appear and disappear to some degree.
Speaking of the moon, we've often heard researchers question what exactly is the moon? What is it made of? We've heard stories um, that the moon is hollow, that it's metal. What information have you heard about the structure of the moon, and why is it so important to be? What's its relativity as far as the scientific community to planet Earth, especially now since there's another one involved?
So the moon, based on the information that we have, very likely was formed when a Mars-sized object collided with Earth about over 4 years ago. And so these two objects collided, and the moon essentially became kind of like an offshoot of this mess that happened at the time. So it is believed that actually it contains some materials from Earth, and it was essentially created by this kind of collision. And so we don't think it's hollow or made of metal. It's just made of basically rocky material, whatever that other small planet that collided with Earth was made out of at the time. That's one of the prevailing theories. And what is interesting about the moon is it helps stabilize our planet. And we think that's one of the reasons that life was able to evolve the way it did on our planet, because the moon being here around us has been stabilizing us, helping us to some degree. But also, about 4 billion years ago, there were a lot of asteroids in our environment. That was because our solar system was kind of finishing being formed, and there were a lot of these big rocks, so to speak, flying around. And the moon, in a way, helped capture a lot of these rocks. So the moon was impacted by many, many asteroids and helped protect the Earth from being impacted with as many. And that also could have helped life evolve on this planet because it had a shield of sorts.
Why do you think that the moon is positioned the way it is? I mean, you're talking about gravitational pull. You're talking about magnetic opposite and negative, forces. Why, with the Earth being the way it is, with the gravity force that we have, how is it that the moon is still staying in this position and not being impacted by the Earth's gravitational pull?
I mean, it is impacted by the Earth's gravitational pull. It basically kind of stayed in this type of position after the collision with that I mentioned that happened several billion years ago. But it is gradually changing, and people have been, observing how the moon, the moon's distance from Earth is gradually changing, but it's essentially in a locked position to some degree with Earth because of the Earth's gravity's pull on the moon.
Let's talk about your non-for-profit a little bit before we wrap up. Tell the viewers a little
Mm-hmm.
bit about what it is and its purpose, and as far as science and research.
Mm-hmm. So my nonprofit is called Extreme Frontiers. I founded it a couple of years ago. And the reason I founded it was because even though I worked for different universities and research institutions, I even led a research facility in Hawaii where I organized simulated missions to the moon and Mars. Unfortunately, I faced a lot of discrimination as a woman and other very difficult work conditions where I was severely underpaid compared to male colleagues and things like that. And so, after having to deal with a lot of unfair conditions like that repeatedly, I decided it's better to just create my own organization through which I hope to do work in more fair and sustainable conditions. And so I still continue the same type of research that I've been doing all around the world, studying extreme life forms and trying to understand whether there could be aliens out there. But I also do a lot of educational and outreach work to be able to teach the public and especially school children about our environment, about space, and to also inspire them to follow their dreams, just like I've been trying to follow mine my whole life.
Wow. Um, what are some of the things that you've discovered with your for profit and with working in collaboration with NASA? What are some of the things that you discovered as they relate to what you call life?
Mm-hmm. What I found so far is that, we've been looking for life in all sorts of extreme environments all around the world. And essentially, everywhere we looked, we found life, whether we looked in depths of oceans, on top of very tall mountains, even in the clouds. Some organisms are able to survive humongous doses of radiation that would kill a human in an instant, and they can stay in that kind of environment for hours and hours. So we have amazing life that can survive on our planet. We're still trying to understand how and why, and how we can learn from them for us to be able to heal better from illnesses and potentially live on other planets and things like that. So what I found is that life always finds a way, and life is amazing, and we have so much to learn from other life forms on our planet. And that's why I'm also hopeful that life could exist somewhere else in the universe, because it's just been incredible to see what life is capable of.
Out of all the things that you just mentioned, and we also know that there's life and plants that are found even on volcanic volcanic islands, as well as in the deepest ocean where volcanical lava pits that underground heat chambers, these organisms are living. What's three of the most outstanding things that you found and you go, wow, this is like totally amazing?
I think what shocked me the most were some of these organisms that can survive huge radiation doses. For example, one of these microbes is called Deinococcus radiodurans, and it's also been nicknamed Conan the Bacterium. So you might, be familiar with Conan the Barbarian, some kind of movie from, I don't know, the 90s or whenever, with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Well, in a similar way, this microbe, this bacterium, is just so incredibly resistant to everything that you throw at it that it's just been considered almost like a superhero to some degree, or maybe super villain. And similar microbes have been put into conditions of outer space or Mars, and despite all the challenges we threw at these microbes, they were able to survive. So that was very fascinating for me. And another thing that I found was very interesting is when I did research in very cold environments, for example, in Greenland, I found that the microbes there can not only just survive there, but they're actually it's a happy home for them in a way, and they're able to produce a lot of nutrients with which they feed the entire ecosystem when the ice melts that they're in. And what that means is these microbes are amazing at fertilizing soils, and we've been trying to use them in simulated Martian soils. So we could essentially use these extreme life forms also to be able to grow food on Mars one day because they can help fertilize even in very extreme environments.
What about these microorganisms as it relates to human studies here on Earth, as far as the medical community, especially when you're dealing with something such as organism or species that can withstand tremendous amount of radiation, and then even like you said, here's an organism that can nutrient the soil. Can you imagine that being put into the human in the humans to help with s- regenerating cell growth from damaged cells and you name it? What's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, this not a field that I'm an expert in, but I do know that these types of organisms are being used in medicine, in different types of industries because of these amazing skills they have. And I think people have been trying to study how they're able to survive the high radiation, how they can heal from it, and whether we could apply that to heal from different things that cause us issues, help us fight cancer better. In the food industry, for example, they've been studying organisms that can survive in very cold conditions to be so that we humans can refrigerate food better. They've been used in different kinds of chemical industries to help preserve biological matter better. So they've definitely been helping us humans in many ways. It's not a field that I'm an expert in, but I know that they've been studied for decades now for these purposes.
Before we wrap up, what do you think? What's your definition of first contact? I heard that this generation will be the first to witness, aka first contact, as it relates to extraterrestrial. And like you said, that can mean any form of life. But what's your take on first contact?
I think, I guess, first contact, again, depending on the circumstances, but it would be something where we are definitely certain we are talking to an alien or an extraterrestrial, because perhaps there might have already been some contact to this date where
Yeah, you're
someone
only
encountered
35
an
years old,
alien.
remember?
Yeah. So, perhaps there've already been some contacts, but it has not been, publicized or proved. So I think what people will officially call first contact is when, it will be on camera, proven to the world that we have made contact of some sort with an entity that is not from Earth.
How do you think the people will react to that? Let's just say it's already happened. And how do you think the people will respond? I know this is a hypothesis, but you're in this field. What do you think? Will people be mad because they kind of already knew that it was life outside of this uh Earth, this planet? What's your take on that?
I think there'll be definitely mixed emotions. In general, seeing how humans have behaved over the last few millennia, I would say probably there would be a lot of fear because it's something new that we don't know how to react to, what to expect from. Are they coming in peace or are they a threat? So I think fear will definitely be something most of us will feel to some degree, and it's natural because it's just something new that we're not prepared for.
Mhm.
I'm sure there'll be a lot of curiosity to know what is it? Is it coming in peace or not? What's going on? And with all the misinformation going around the world through social media and elsewhere, I wouldn't be surprised if there would be also a lot of something like that going on, where people will either be disproving it, or making perhaps some hypotheses that might exaggerate the situation. So it'll be definitely something that will shake the planet, and I hope that it will bring us together rather than separate us, and that will finally build bridges for humans to work together better, to be able to figure out a solution to how to communicate with these life forms, what to do next, and all that.
I see you wearing your NASA badge. Very proud to get that. I know you are. What's your end game? What's your end game here?
I'm still working on my goal to become an astronaut one day. It's difficult for someone from Slovakia because we don't have our own space program that would allow people to go to space yet. Even though, through a lot of my work and work of my colleagues back home, we have been able to help push the space sector forward in Slovakia. So, for example, Slovakia is now an associated member of the European Space Agency,
Mhm.
which means that finally Slovakian scientists and companies and so on, they can actually collaborate with the European Space Agency, which they were not able to until recently. Um, but unfortunately, in terms of going to space, they're still very limited to non-existent possibilities for someone from my country. But there's been a lot of change over the last couple of decades that I've been working on this, and I really hope that I will see the day that I'll be able to go to space to do something useful, to do some research. And if it doesn't work out for me, I hope that all my efforts will help open up doors to other people from countries like my own, where these possibilities are very limited.
You know what, Michaela, you may be the first astronaut in your country. You may be that instrument that's needed to bring that awareness to Slovakia. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on to the show. How can the viewers reach out to you and your foundation before we wrap up?
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. So my foundation or nonprofit is called Extreme Frontiers, and you can find information about me and the nonprofit on my website, which is michaelamusilova.com. You can also find me on all sorts of social media, from Instagram, Facebook, and so on, under astro_Michaela. So please feel free to contact me through my website or through social media, and I'll be happy to answer any of your questions or provide you with more information.
You
Thank you.
know, when we had that first contact, Michaela, we definitely gonna have you come back because you got to tone everybody down and keep them calm and be like, hey, I told you this was gonna happen. But thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show. Wish you the best. Want you to come back, share more information about the space travel, what's going on in our universe. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been another exciting episode of the Andre the Beast Crayton Show.